The advice and opinions expressed by Dr. Granpeesheh and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice.
Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh is
Dr. Doreen is an expert in autism. Doreen Granpeesheh.
Dr. Granpeesheh.
Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh.
Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh is a visionary in the field of autism. Now you can ask her questions on Ask Dr. Doreen.
Good morning and welcome to Ask Dr. Doreen. I get to be with Dr. Doreen today.
We're together finally. Good morning.
It's thrilled to me to get to be here with you. I enjoy you so much.
It's been a while.
It has been a while. I'm Shannon Penrod, and of course, this is Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh, Dr. Doreen, as we call her. She's an expert in the field of autism, and I believe the expert.
Oh, thank you.
You're my ride or die always. If I want to know something, I get the chance to talk to a lot of experts. I love that. But I always say I love to come home to you because you speak my language.
That's so nice.
And I know so many of you feel that way. Dr. Doreen has been working in this field for more than 45 years. It's crazy to think of. We all want her skincare regimen. But I also know it's more than that. You also are very healthy and you work out. And you have good genes, your mother.
This right after you and I were talking about how aging is difficult.
I mean, you get to a certain point where the wheels start to fall off the bus no matter what you're doing, right?
Oh my gosh.
But you're a very health-minded person. You're very active. You're a young-minded person.
I try to be, yes, very true.
You are, and you're an inspiration to me. I want to be you when I grow up, but not really. I want to be like a disciple of you when I grow up. So I'm working on that.
Thank you.
There we go. So anyway, but she donates this time every week so that you guys can write in, you can ask her questions. We always have a starting topic that's like our jumping off point, and we've had a bunch of questions that came in on the Dr. Doreen website over the last week that Marina will kill me if I don't get answered by the end of today. And Marina, I'm on the job. I've got them all here, including the one you sent this morning, and we're gonna try and make it happen. We're also giving a shout out to Anna, who's already with us, saying good morning, and Monia. She says hello, both, and she's waving. Happy to be here with you. We're happy that you're here as well. So just a little bit of housekeeping. We're live right now on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, so you can be writing in like Anna and Monia. One's writing in on Facebook, the other one's writing in on YouTube, so that it's all working. You can write in on Twitter or whatever it is that we're calling that now. Is it X? I don't know what it is.
Yep.
I don't know. I'm not hip enough to know. So we're on a need to know basis. Also, this show will be available later on our YouTube channels. It'll be available on Autism Live and on Ask Dr. Doreen. We encourage you to really start to look for the Ask Dr. Doreen on its own YouTube channel because we are going to cut it off. We've already cut it off once, and then we kind of reneged on it and went back, but we're going to cut it off from Autism Live because it really is its own podcast. And it will also be available as a free download wherever you get your podcasts. And again, it is its own podcast. So please subscribe to Ask Dr. Doreen. We appreciate it when you guys like, share, especially review. I'll tell you, it would be such a wonderful 4th of July gift for us if you just would review Ask Dr. Doreen on iTunes. Like, if you really want to make our day, that's a great way to do it. And it helps other people to be able to find it. So just a suggestion. By the way, all next week for the shows next week, it's just going to be a marathon of the best of Ask Dr. Doreen. So for that holiday week, just tune in and you can watch Ask Dr. Doreen all week long. I also want to let you know that when you download us, any of our shows in podcasts, you will get advertisements. I hope you will enjoy them and embrace them because they're what make it free for you, which is a wonderful thing. Some of you, though, are working out or doing other things, and you have said, hey, I'd rather pay a little bit and not get the ads. We made that possible for you. You can go to glow.fm/autism live. It's $5 a month. It's actually cheaper if you buy it not by the month and by the year, but $5 a month is a very small amount. You get everything that we do with the Autism Network. You get Autism Live, you get Ask Dr. Doreen, you get some of our other podcasts that we're incubating, including our newest one, which is Today's Hyperfixation. So please, if that's something that interests you, glow.fm/autism live. I think I've covered most of what I needed to cover, so we can jump into our topic, which is how does ABA differ based on age or ability?
Yeah.
Because this is a question we get a great deal. Do you want me to
Really?
launch into a question, or do you
No,
want...
I mean, let me just give some background, I guess.
Yeah.
So it is ABA, if it's going to be good, needs to be very individualized. Otherwise, it is just not going to work because the child is not going to be interested, and it's not going to work. So we do individualize it based on, I guess, age, yes, and also ability. And the ability is probably extremely important because it's such a wide spectrum, and you have children who are completely, let's say, non-vocal, not able to communicate at all verbally, and need a lot of help and a lot of support. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have individuals who are really pretty mildly affected by autism, I guess, and will need some help with, let's say, how to interact with others, or, socially. So it's a huge spectrum, and so it has to be very different. And then age-wise, I think it's really important because a lot of people will just continue to work on different things regardless of the child's actual age. And that's kind of important because when you're dealing with, let's say, a 3-year-old, you're not going to want to try to teach them advanced cognitive or executive functioning skills because even in typically developing population, they're not there yet, right? And there's plenty of other stuff that you should be teaching the 3-year-old or the 4-year-old. So it's really important, I think, to also pay attention to age because, if you waste your time trying to teach a child something that's above their typical trajectory of chronological age, they're going to struggle. You're wasting time because you haven't taught the prerequisite skills, and the whole thing falls apart. And that's the other thing I think that's important, and we can get into it and talk about just very specific questions, but it is important to do things in a specific order. Like there is there are certain things that are prereqs to other things, and if you try to teach things that are too complex and you haven't taught the earlier lessons, let's say, a couple of different things will happen. One is the child will start memorizing, either give up because it's too hard, or they'll start memorizing and they won't be able to figure out kind of how to put things together themselves. And that's the key to good ABA, is not for the child to memorize things, but to learn actually, I have to, these are the segments to my phrase, to my sentence, and this is how I put them together. So it is important to do it in a certain order so that it becomes gradually more complex. And I think all of those things go into it, right? And then there's other aspects, of course, which is some kids you just have to teach them through visual means. Other kids are very auditory. Other kids can't learn things. Like, you do need to pay attention to the child's sensory input abilities as well. So all of that kind of goes into what you're doing. And the last thing, Shannon, is time. So that's very, very important because when you have a very young child, you might be blessed and have insurance coverage or, whatever, time. Like you have time because the child's not in school yet. And you can teach the child as much as you want, lots of stuff, and you're probably doing 40, even 50 hours a week of intervention. But when the child hits a certain age, 5, 6, 7, etc., now we have to bring in academics. And then as the child gets older, there are other things that take over, and then your priorities change. You no longer have the luxury of teaching everything. You just don't, because now you have an older individual and you have to teach them the most important things. So time, the amount of time you can dedicate to ABA has a big impact on what you actually teach. So it's all those things.
I love to listen to you talk because it really helps me to understand things. And I know, ABA is a science. Right? And there are principles that go with science. My head, I didn't study science. My head always goes to arts. Right? And so I always look at it though, and I think of ABA and the delivery of ABA as an art,
Yeah.
a fine art. And I always thought of it as that there is this toolbox of paintbrushes and
Right.
different paints and different crayons and things. And which ones are you going to use to achieve your outcome?
Right.
Right. And that it's always fascinating to me to watch. I really love when I get to go to any of our centers and see individuals working with individuals,
Right.
because you get to see the toolbox come out and what are they using for this kiddo
Right.
to help them. But I get it that underneath all of that is there's a science,
Right.
and the science has been proven over and over and over to be wildly effective.
Yes.
It's not just some random thing that people are slapping paint on a
Right.
paintbrush.
Right.
No, it's a science. But I also love to look at it as an art, because I do think
It is.
it's
yeah.
exciting to watch some of our technicians, the way they go, okay, well, now I'm going to use this brush, and to see the kiddo react.
Right.
It's thrilling.
That's very true. That's really a good point.
Absolutely
Yeah.
thrilling. Well, and so we've got a lot of questions coming in. We're saying hi to Rodney. We're saying hi to Rosie. We got some questions coming in, but I want to get to this one, and then later we are going to get to some of the ones that Marina sent in. I have a question. I have a son that is now an adult. He did ABA when he was little, as much as we could afford / get funding for. Now my daughter, 11 years old, has been diagnosed, and they are recommending 20 hours of ABA for her. I know she needs some, but this seems like overkill to me. My son never got that much, and he had significantly more challenges than she has. She's very verbal, but has some issues with self-regulation. I just don't think it makes sense to do that many hours. I think she needs to be with peers that aren't on the spectrum. The ABA company is not interested in doing 8 hours a week. Is this just about the money?
Mm-hmm. So let's address that first part. That's really important. That last part about, there is some parents and some people in general say this is just about money.
Yeah.
And everybody should understand that there is no difference to a company if they do 20 hours with one child or 5 hours with 4 kids. It doesn't matter, right? And believe me, every company has a wait list. There are so
Exactly.
many kids trying to get in. No one cares whether, no one is trying to do intensive hours because they make money off of it at all. It is in fact, it's the opposite, because insurance companies give you, us as providers, a very hard time if we ask for intensive hours. They would prefer that we don't. So when a provider goes out on a limb and says, hey, I really think your child needs 20 hours, and they're willing to put that in a report that's going to go to an insurance company, they're actually putting themselves out there in the sense that they're taking a risk and saying, I'm going to support your child to get these hours because I truly feel like this is necessary. And they're making themselves a target for the insurance company. So it's the exact opposite. When someone tells you your child needs more hours, they're being very genuine. They're being very honest about it, because they don't care. They could have 5 other kids receive the hours. It's not about hours. It's about
They're actually
your
fighting
child.
for what is ethically right for
Right,
your child.
for your child. Exactly. So please don't think it has anything to do with money. All providers have wait lists, so it's very, very easy to fill those blocks. The second thing, though, I want to tell you is that I can't comment on what your child specifically needs because I don't know your child, but it is not uncommon to have 20 hours for someone who's 11 years old, because there's a lot to learn. This is kind of what I was talking about. Yes, on the one hand, we want our kids around peers, but how much of the time when they're around peers are they actually learning new skills? So let's assume it's 40% of the time, even 50% of the time, which in most cases isn't the case, but still. But when you're doing one-to-one, it's almost 100% of the time that your child is learning something new. And in order to socialize, there's a ton of skills that have to be done. Just think about one example, which is like walking up to a group of others and joining their conversation. How difficult or easy do you think that is? Think about I have to join this group, which means I have to learn how to enter a conversation that's already happening. I have to do that appropriately. I have to stand in a place that's not uncomfortable for others, so not too close, not too far. I have to use language that's appropriate to that group. That means, are they adults? Are they children? Are they my peers? Are we inside a classroom? Are we outside on the playground? All of that changes the way we talk, right? Then I have to be able to look at their facial expression and their body language to make sure what I'm talking about is still of interest to them. I have to know how to take turns so I don't hog the conversation. I have to be able to repair the conversation if I can see from their facial expression that they're all kind of losing and walking away. I mean, it just goes on. And that's just one conversation. So think about the number of things that we learn over the course of 11 years that aid us in having an appropriate social interaction. And that's just social. Now, talk about other things, like maybe your child has frustrations, maybe they have anxiety over things, and your ABA team wants to also teach your child how to manage their own frustrations, how to express their feelings better, how to talk about things, events that have happened. And there's so many things. There's so many things. And then there's all the advanced skills, Shannon, as you know. It's like teaching your child to learn things by observing others, teaching your child how to see other people's perspectives by inferring information from their environment. There's advanced stuff that goes into teaching. So I wouldn't doubt that your child needs that. I would look at what program the ABA provider puts together for your child. And you should, as a parent, you should always be involved with that anyway. You should always agree or disagree. And you can always say, I think my child knows this, and I'd rather do something a little bit more advanced, or, be part of the discussion when it comes to content. But, I would welcome more hours. I would welcome it.
Can I just wax poetic about intensity for a second?
Yeah.
Because this is a conversation that I have with parents a lot. Because I think we don't have experience with ABA. We don't have 10 friends that have gone through it to be able to compare. And for this parent, they're comparing it to another child that they went through it with at a different time. And I note that it's a boy versus a girl. It's very individual, right?
Yes.
But just in general, intensity, I find that we get it in other realms. If you're going to go to the gym and you're going to go to the gym half an hour, 3 times a week, what you're going to do is maintain. Your body is not going to look significantly different at the end of a year.
It's true. Because
you went to the gym for a half an hour, 3 times a week.
Right.
If you start going to the gym 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, your body is going to look significantly different in 60 days.
Right.
Significantly different. And your body is going to work from that point forward with those muscles.
That's exactly
which is compound interest.
That's exactly right.
And so, for a lot of times parents go, well, we don't want to do anything intensive. We feel like it'll be too hard. And I'm like, you are missing the boat of what the science says and what we understand intensity is for everything else. For your daughter to get 20 hours right now, it's not forever.
Right.
If you do 20 hours now, she might finish all the things she needs to do, and maybe she doesn't need more help. Or you can circle the drain with 8 hours, which is just enough for her to get just frustrated and not quite get it, and do that for years and never have the outcome that you want to.
Right.
So please, when they give you a recommendation for a certain level of intensity to take to your funding source, that your funding source will take advantage of it, please do the intensity. It's the best gift for your child. I look at everything that I do.
Yeah.
Like there are things technically that I need to do that I suck at. Can we be honest? And because I only have to do it once a month. If I had to do it every day, 5 times a day, I would already be proficient at it.
No, absolutely.
We all understand this for everything else. Let your child get to proficiency. If you were taking your child to violin lessons, they would say practice, 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 practice.
Yeah.
Right? Which is just more hours.
Just think about learning a language.
I was just going to say,
it's the
same thing.
It all has to do with your intensity.
They want it to be immersive. So let your child have the 20 hours. Okay. I want to get to some of the questions. Let's do a Marina one first.
Okay.
Okay. Marina sent one that says, my 24-year-old has autism and anxiety where he tends to worry about people being mad at him. He had an incident back in high school where he thought this girl was mad at him. There was an incident where the girl thought he was stalking her, and now the school has enforced a safety plan where he's not allowed to interact with the girl again. He also perseverates about being in trouble, and when he's upset, he tends to yell outside. Any info on how to help him through this would be helpful.
Oh my gosh,
I know.
it's
Hard.
heartbreaking.
It is.
So, yeah, I mean, part of the issue here is that obviously he's, we don't know. We don't know what actual behavior took place, but this is a really good example of a child who's trying very, very hard to integrate and just doesn't have all of the skills to know how things appear from someone else's perspective. That's kind of what we're talking about. You know, this is one of those scenarios where I think it's, first of all, let me just say that a lot of kids, typically developing and probably more kids on the spectrum, have anxiety these days. Like, anxiety is just over the top right now. It's like the biggest problem. So let's talk about how to deal with the anxiety. And so generally speaking, when there's anxiety, there are two methods that work. One is cognitive behavior therapy, and the second one is medication. And usually those are the two, they go together, right? Now, the issue with our kids on the spectrum is that sometimes their level of comprehension of abstract concepts is not enough for them to benefit from cognitive behavior therapy. Because the concept of cognitive behavior therapy is to explain to the individual in lots of different ways that their thoughts are not real. Their thoughts are what causes the anxiety, and they're not really going to happen. So think about it. When we have anxiety, it's always kind of like apprehension, right? It's like, oh, something disastrous is going to happen. That's a faulty thought, because that disaster doesn't always happen. Or it's like, you know, we have anxiety, social anxiety, let's say, because in our head we think, oh, everybody's talking about me. That's not the case, but that's a thought that's leading to this heightened level of anxiety. Anxiety in general is a reaction to things we think, right? They're not necessarily things that have happened, but just things that are in our head. Now, if your child is at the level where you can sit down and do some cognitive behavior therapy with the child and help them understand that their thoughts are leading to these feelings, that's the way to go. But if your child is not there, then you have to do two other things. One is you have to consult with a psychiatrist and try to get your child on some anti-anxiety medications. Vast majority of Americans are already taking anti-anxiety medications. They're the same as antidepressants, and there's a whole different array of them. So it's very important to try different ones until you get the right one. These medications do not change your personality. They just allow you to not be as worried about things because you are not absorbing as much serotonin. So these are usually serotonin or norepinephrine reuptake inhibitors. So that is number one. The second thing to do is to teach the prerequisite skills that will one day allow your child to get to the point where they will benefit from CBT, from cognitive behavior therapy. So at this point, you would, for example, start teaching about the difference of things like what we think versus what we do versus, you know, how that engages with the environment, like thoughts and behavior and the difference of those. If that's still too abstract, then you step back and you just start teaching language concepts that are going to help. That's why earlier I was saying that it's so important to do things in a certain way, because eventually you do get to a point where you want to talk about these abstract concepts. We call them cognition, but it's in our cognitive curriculum. But you can't do that unless there's enough comprehension of just basic language. So you have to always go back to that. But, you know, that's essentially what you do. There are other, depending on what the anxiety is based on, and sometimes we talk about anxiety, but it's really more phobia. Like, for instance, people talk about social anxiety, and sometimes for some individuals it is so bad that it could be compared to like a phobia of people, right? So agoraphobia, like individuals who are so afraid of going outside of their house, they just want to stay inside, they want to self-isolate. And if your child is experiencing a phobia, which is related to like one setting or one type of stimulus, there are other behavioral ways like that we've talked about, like systematic desensitization, where you can gradually expose your child to that particular scenario while pairing it with relaxation techniques. I'm terrible. I preach about meditation. I wish I had more time to do meditation. I don't, but teaching your child some just calming breathing exercises, meditation, that type of thing, just being, calm and so on, will help any individual who's experiencing anxiety. But it is about the anxiety. And let me tell you, being in an environment like that is not going to help. An environment where the child has been kind of labeled already or stigmatized and is not allowed to go near someone or something. So, and of course, a lot of times our hands are tied when it comes to the school environment that our children are in. I would recommend, though, that someone, whether it's you or a professional, really try to sit with your child and explain to them that they didn't do anything wrong. Like, when our kids get I don't want to use the word punished, but this is a punishment. Like, you cannot go anywhere near this individual, right? That's kind of, imagine if someone said that to you with anyone, it doesn't even matter, like someone in your environment, you just cannot go near that individual. It's very constraining. It feels like there's like an invisible jail around you, So it affects your self-esteem. It exacerbates your anxiety. It makes you a lot more self-conscious, and it's very uncomfortable. So I would sit down and try to understand your child's feelings around that, try to help explain to your child what happened. This goes back to really helping your child understand the other individual's thoughts, right? And how they perceived it isn't necessarily the reality. But like I said, these are very advanced concepts, and sometimes we just have to remove our kids from certain environments because they're making them worse. What are your child's rights? I mean, that other child obviously has a right, but your child does too,
Absolutely. But in looking back at the question, because this young man is 24 now, so I'm
Yes.
thinking they are no longer at the high
this
school
environment, right?
I'm hoping that that's the case, because if they are still at that environment
Right.
with this person, my personal parent recommendation would be
Pull them out.
look for another school.
Yeah.
I was looking to see how close are we to graduate, but if they're 24, I'm assuming they're no longer there
Right.
anymore.
Right.
So in
this
terms
is
of
an event that occurred in the past that
Excuse me.
probably traumatized the individual.
and it keeps coming up, that
Yeah.
perceptive
Yeah,
thought.
because no one helped resolve it. And that's exactly my point. Doesn't matter with every individual, unless someone helps you understand a situation well and understand your feelings around it, someone else's feelings around it, it's always going to stay with you, and you're going to feel like it's going to keep creeping up because you're trying to resolve it. You're trying to figure it out in your head. So, that's just not fair. So this is actually kind of trauma type stuff, right? It's the type of stuff that people who've gone through trauma experience. And again, this is not, you cannot resolve these things through behavioral therapy. That's not really the way to go. It is important to try to get your child into some sort of psychological intervention. And I don't know, again, this is what kills me, is that a lot of our kids don't benefit from talk therapy or psych therapy because their comprehension is not quite there, but they suffer
Yeah.
for sure. So the other thing, though, that just came to mind is try to help your child get past it by putting a spotlight, I guess, on some skill. Like I often talk about how our kids never really get to feel, or rarely get to feel, a sense of pride about themselves, and the life and the environment doesn't support us in terms of encouraging our kids in areas that would help them have higher self-esteem. That's kind of where you need to focus now, is what can I do to give my child higher self-esteem? What skill is he good at, or what skill can I teach him that he would become good at, where he is applauded, where people talk about how good he is? Because you need to balance it out. This is where the fair thing comes in. It's like he experienced something that made him feel really bad about himself. He's still ruminating over it. Can we give him something else? Can we, first of all, explain to him? If you can, go ahead. If you can't, just try to give him some other thing that's going to make him feel really good about himself.
There you go. Can I ask about two other things
Yeah.
that might be out there?
Yeah.
I want you to tell me. One of them is tapping. That,
Yeah.
but I don't know how much of tapping you have is like CBT that you have to understand. I don't know research wise, but I know they've been doing more tapping with younger kids too.
With trauma, yeah. So tapping is an intervention that is done for PTSD, right? Mainly it has been successful for PTSD. You don't have to have comprehension of what happened. You do have to have the ability of bringing up in your vision, in your memory, the events.
Okay.
Because the way that you do tapping is that you pair tapping, which is literally tapping a certain number of areas, with a visualization of the event.
Yes.
So, and then the concept is that it releases energy, and no one really understands why it works, but it has worked a lot with veterans, for example, who come back from very, very traumatic situations. So there are tapping specialists, and you can certainly try it. That's one way to go. It's a little bit, again, like, because part of tapping is your child being able to kind of relive that situation. That's where it becomes a little bit concerning.
Okay.
But talk to a psychologist who does tapping and see if it helps.
A lot of now on the back of your insurance card, and it has the number for mental health. If you go to the website, a lot of times they'll list what their specialties are, and we're seeing more and more tapping.
Yeah.
And it's also called EFT.
Yeah.
Right?
I forget the
I think
actual.
it's emotional freedom.
There's lots of different names for tapping now. Yeah.
Yeah. But the good thing about it is that if it works pretty quickly. So that if you do it once and you see that it's trauma inducing for your child, you wouldn't do it again. Maybe.
It will take a while though to get there, because what they do is you will do the tapping exercises, and then you need to bring up visually a few different times closer and closer approximations to the actual event that traumatized you. Now, because it's a thought, none of us really know if the child is actually visualizing that.
That's true.
These are some of the problems that you encounter when you do tapping with individuals on the spectrum.
Okay, and the other thing I was thinking about was art.
Yeah.
That art sometimes is a way to be able to express what you're feeling, get it out, put it in a place where you can look at it and change it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, and
creativity in general is going to be a very good way to express yourself.
There
for
we
sure.
go. Okay. I know we're getting a lot of questions online. I want to start to get to them, and we're going to go back and forth between those and the ones on the website. Monia said, my son is 4 and doing great so far with ABA. However, he recently became extremely oppositional. I get a no for absolutely everything, and it's exhausting. I try to offer choices, but it's not always working. How can I get him to comply a bit more, please? And thank you so much for your help.
Yeah, this is very hard. Does she say anything about age or
4.
situations?
4.
Okay, so we don't know what the situations are, but let me just explain kind of how behavior works. If I say no and you back off, I was very effective. Done. Right? So I've now learned, and actually it's not a bad thing that your child has learned to use the word no. A lot of kids, when they don't want something, will either hit or push or do some sort of assaultive aggressive behavior. So being able to say no is not bad. In and of itself, it's a good thing. That said, we need our kids to do things that they often don't want to do. And unfortunately, life forces us to make them do it, right? So, for example, a lot of kids don't want to go to school. They don't want to get ready in the morning. They don't want to do this, that, or they don't want to eat their vegetables, whatever it might be, right? They don't want to wear the right clothing.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. So the way to make a behavior change, the rule is you break it up, make it simpler, and you increase the reinforcers. So the reward that the child gets from saying no is being left alone. So there's a certain value to that, right? Let's say I say no. You tell me I have to eat vegetables. I say no to that. The benefit, the reward that I'm getting from that is not having to eat things that I don't like. Okay. Pardon?
I won.
I won.
Yeah.
And there's a value to that, right? There's a certain amount of value attributed to I don't have to eat this yucky tasting thing, whatever it is. There's a value to it. Now, what we have to do is we have to make the value the reinforcer of complying with your request more. It's really that simple. So that's why people would say, if you eat your vegetables, you can have dessert. Because the value of having a dessert, a highly preferred item, would often outweigh the value of not having your vegetables. So that's kind of the trick. The trick is, okay, he's going to avoid me, or he's going to avoid a task by saying no. What can I do to actually make him want to do it for some bigger reward? And that's what you have to ask yourself. And that's why it's very important always to do what we call a reinforcement inventory, or, just a forced choice inventory. Like, you always have to know what your child's motivated that day, that moment. Yeah. What is their motivation, right? If someone's just had food, if someone just had cookies, they're not going to be motivated by more dessert, right? But they will be motivated perhaps by playtime, or playing with you, or having a new toy, or something else. So you do need to list at all different times and frequently all the different things that your child is interested in to receiving. If you don't have powerful reinforcers, you can't do anything. It's just that simple. You need reinforcers. And let me tell you, I know a lot of parents will tell me, my child isn't motivated by anything. Everyone is motivated by something. For example, computer time, watching a video, playing on an iPad, whatever it is. Everybody has something, right? You have to figure those out. You have to restrict them all the time, so that when your child complies with you, they get it and it's powerful. If you don't restrict the reinforcer the rest of the time, your child satiates. They get enough of it. So they don't care. They're not motivated. This is like someone who, I don't know, gets access to cookies and cake all the time. A dessert is not going to be powerful. But if someone doesn't have access, they only have access when they do something that you asked for, when they do something good, then that's going to be very, very powerful, and they're going to actually be motivated to comply. So that's how you manipulate this situation. You have to, first of all, figure out what your child is motivated to do, what are the reinforcers, and then you only give them when your child complies. The other thing, though, that you do is you want to make sure that the thing you're asking for is easy. Yeah. That's super important. If it is easier than not complying, then your child is much more likely to do it. And the way that you do that is you break it up, you model it, you help, you prompt, you start the child out and let them just complete the last part. There's lots of different ways to make your request easier. You can put it on a visual. Sometimes kids need to see that if I do this, I get this. You can put that on a piece of paper. You do this, this is your reward. Look, you can see your reward. Like, there's lots of little tricks, as you said, like art, that's the art of enticing your child so that they know. One thing also I just want to say is that a lot of times our kids get into like little power battles with you, right? So make sure that you're not arguing with your child. When they say no, don't argue about the thing. Just maybe make sure that the child knows that if they comply, this is what they're going to get. And that's that.
Yeah. She did write back in and said, for examples, she said he would say no for everything from going to eat, putting on pajamas, taking a bath. One of the things that I always say to parents when they go, well, I tell them to put on their pajamas, they don't want to put on their pajamas. And I always say, what's in it for them?
Yeah.
Tell me what is in it. Like,
Yeah.
I know why you want them in their pajamas, because that starts the night towards them going to sleep and you get a break.
Yep.
But what's in it for them? And,
Yeah.
and that's that fair thing that you always talk
Yeah.
about.
Yeah.
That if there is everything you just said about making sure that there's a meaningful reinforcer
Right.
for when you put on your pajamas.
And so in that scenario, we're talking about a child who's also possibly not, I think she said, eating dinner. So of all of those, like, which is the one that you can just temporarily not fight? And
Yeah.
that one is dinner. Okay. So great. If your child's hungry and you offer them a healthy dessert to put on their pajamas, I guarantee you they'll put on their pajamas. If you offer them a healthy type of dessert to get in bed, they'll probably do it. So, and if you make bedtime the most fun time of the night, whether it's reading or whatever, pick your battles. If they don't have to eat dinner for 3 or 4 nights, no big deal. If they don't have to take a bath, no big deal. It doesn't, pick the battles. Get into the relationship first, where your child understands that if I do X, I get Y. And mom or dad is the one who's going to give me that reinforcer. Once you establish that, then kids become a lot more compliant because they always know there's something good in it for me.
Yeah. Okay, another one of Marina's questions. Dear Dr. Doreen, hope you are keeping well and thank you for all the advice and time that you take to do these shows. They give me such hope and guidance. I live in the UK with a 2.5-year-old daughter who is showing signs and we're awaiting diagnosis. I suppose I just wanted to ask you, in your experience, were there any kids who grew up and actually had a family and kids of their own at all? It just breaks my heart, and I just want to hug this parent.
Yes.
Because that is the question we all have in our hearts when our children are first being diagnosed. Right?
Yes, I see. And that's so difficult. Yes, I do. I have many children who are no longer children. I have kids that I treated from age 2 who are now in 40.
Yeah.
Like, which is amazing. I was just
Right.
trying to think of some of my oldest kids. And yeah, they are married, and one of them has kids. The other one almost had kids, will have kids hopefully soon. I'm just going through and thinking of my kids. And yeah, please don't think that far in advance. I think, first of all, if you get your diagnosis, and by the way, I have a colleague in England if you need help with someone who can diagnose pretty rapidly. But that said, once you get the diagnosis, focus on the now, and focus on all the things you have to do between now and when your child's an adult. And you're very, very lucky that your child's only 2.5, because there's just so much that you can do right now. So get the diagnosis and let's get your child into a very enriched environment so that they can really start learning. And God willing, you'll go all the way. He or she will be able to go very far.
And there are lots of adults on the spectrum that have kids. They're the reason, the moms are the reason why I don't identify as an autism mom anymore.
Right.
Because they came to me and said, hey, we want to identify as autism moms because we are individuals who are on the autism spectrum and we have kids. So can you call yourself something else? Which is why I call myself a parent of a neurodiverse individual now.
I see.
And I don't refer to myself as an autism mom anymore. So just know it's there. It's possible. Okay. Brian wanted to know, good morning, Dr. Doreen and Shannon. Any ABA thoughts about scripting? Example, I could not stop my son going through the words narrative from a 30-minute video about world history. And he said, great, it's not gaming or a superhero screen versus learning, but shutting off the world and world communication, a tough one. and such ASD problems rise to the surface when he is tired, home or elsewhere. He said, have a good day, but he also wanted you to let you know that, remind you that the son is advanced in language, age 7, but that they feel like they missed the boat by not correcting this previously.
Yeah, I have had many kids who script, and I want to say that the positive side of this is that usually a lot of the kids that script, whether it's words or numbers, are very smart. Usually that is the case, that these kids are extremely smart. And it's almost like the scripting, I don't know, it's interesting. There was a phase where I thought that the scripting is communicative, but now I feel it's more like calming. It's kind of like a ritual that they engage in that is calming to them. There's a couple of things, and don't worry, 7 is pretty young, and I wouldn't, there's lots of stuff you can do. I think the first thing to do is, and especially since your child is very high functioning, this is where you start working on teaching your child the difference between thoughts and actions, because actions are the out loud scripting and thoughts are, we all script in our brains, right? In our minds. We don't say it out loud, but we think. And teaching your child to think instead of say is probably a really very beneficial thing that you can do for your child. There's lots of different ways that you can do that. You can start by shaping it into, like, say it lower, lower, whisper, and then just think it in your head and go that path. Or you can actually just teach your child to, go from being allowed to being completely quiet all at once. But the idea is you can continue to script, but do it in your head. You can't do it out loud. I don't know if you have a team of behavioral people, but if you do, they can easily help you with helping your child differentiate those two circumstances. Another thing that helps our kids sometimes with scripting is actually, the odd thing with scripting is that there's the pleasure part of it, or the, the calming, the soothing part of it. And for some kids has to do with hearing their own voice. So if you actually put sound deafening headphones, like Bose headphones on your child, sometimes the scripting is no longer enjoyable.
Yeah.
So they stop scripting right away. Now, I do want to say that if you can also teach, and I'm thinking of one of my kids who over the last few years, he used to script numbers. So we taught him lots of different ways to, he's very, very intelligent child and just sees things differently. But there are other types of scripting that might be appropriate. For example, can your child participate in drama, in theater? That is where we memorize scripts and we say them, right? Can your child learn to sing? Singing is memorization of a script. So there's lots of appropriate ways to practice scripting. And you always kind of want to have your child engage in something that is along the lines of what they like to do, and you're stopping it in other environments where it's not appropriate. And, teach your child to identify when it's not appropriate. Like, does your child know how to read other people's facial expression? Because if you're scripting out loud, other people are probably looking at you like, what's that? Like thinking like that's not okay. So teach your child, these are the advanced skills that I was talking about, is like, why do all kids not shout out their thoughts? They don't, because they have this concept of being able to look around them and then get embarrassed if they say something inappropriate. And being embarrassed requires us to be aware of other people's response to us. Obviously, you don't want too much of that, but a certain amount of that helps us fit into society, right? So teaching your child to look at other people's reactions when they're scripting, it really just depends on how far your child can go, like what is their comprehension right now. If they're able to see that their out loud scripting is kind of disturbing to others, or it's something that others find odd, they're much more likely to script in their head, which is essentially have a thought. Or they will learn that it's okay for me to script when I'm on stage or if I'm singing into a microphone, but not the rest of the time.
Okay, I've got about 6 questions in less than 8 minutes.
Great.
So I don't know if we're going to get through all of them, but this one kind of goes hand in hand. Andrea says, my son has learned to say good morning to his friends, but is still having a verbal prompt before he says it. However, lately, he will, I guess, prompt himself, and he says to himself, say good morning to. She wants to know, how do I eliminate him prompting himself with the word say? And they said, thank you.
Yeah. So a couple of things. One is that probably when he was taught this, people were using the word say, which is what he's memorized that as part of the whole thing. I would just, lots of different ways you can block a verbal. You can either just put your hand on his mouth as soon as he starts to say, or you can just teach him that there's 2 words, right? Good morning. And if he says say good morning, go, good morning, and just repeat that over time so that your child understands it's just 2 words. But that's not his fault. That's him learning what was taught to him.
Yeah.
So you just have to be very careful because he's got he's good at imitation.
Yeah.
So.
On the topic of literacy, my son is almost 3 and has no play skills, but can spend hours looking at books, at the images. He is not hyperlexic, but he is a visual learner. We are wondering if we should be teaching him letters and to read so that he can learn that way. Again, almost 3.
You know, you can, but kids who are into letters usually are into letters by themselves. So I'm not sure that you need to go down that path. I guess my question is, what's your goal? If he likes the images, there's lots of different things you can do with the images. Obviously, you can go straight into pretend play, right? You can do that, or you can start using the images to advance his language. What is so-and-so doing? Who is this? What color is that? You can ask a million questions based on the images. That's probably the direction I would take. I wouldn't really go into reading at age 3 unless he is showing a propensity for it himself.
Okay, Christina, who we love so much, they had services in Oregon, and then when you left CARD, Oregon was closed.
Yes.
She says there is no CARD in Oregon anymore. We are having increased self-injurious behavior lately. She said it is not attention seeking because he doesn't want us alone as well.
Yeah, that's not good. So something in his environment, Christina, is causing him distress. So you should probably be really heavily looking at kind of that fairness factor, I guess, is where it comes. What in his environment is causing him to be distressed enough to do self-injury? And I think that's really, the other side of it is obviously when he does self-injury, is someone running to his rescue, right? It's either maintained by attention or he's just trying to express that he is very upset about something. So I would investigate those 2 things and see what's going on there. I'm so sorry to hear that. That's not pleasant at all.
Kay says, my kiddo has been showing behaviors such as aggression towards the therapist and teachers and also showing inappropriate touching behaviors. My child is prepubescent. The ABA team cannot determine a consistent trigger, and they have noted that the behaviors have all 4 functions but are frequent and intense in nature. The child does have ASD and ADHD. Endocrinology appointment is coming up.
Oh, gosh. Okay. Not good enough for your team to just say these behaviors have all 4 functions. You need to go one by one, and you need to identify the aggression under each function. So aggression for escape occurs when this is happening. Aggression for attention occurs under these circumstances. Aggression for tangible objects occurs at these moments in time, and then start dealing with each one.
Yes.
Like, that's what your team is there for. I totally understand that your child has a lot of other stuff going on, but we essentially, that's what ABA is for. If nothing else, your ABA team should be dealing with these aggressive things for you, with everyone in your child's environment. And if they're not, I would recommend that you change your provider, because this is exactly what ABA is for. I'm so sorry, because I can't imagine how difficult that is, and it is very possible for a behavior to be maintained by more than one function, but let's deal with it. Like, they need to be giving you specific instructions about how to deal with each one.
I also want to know what changed, because they say that has been showing behaviors. So, like, this wasn't always. So what changed?
Yes, and also they said, I think, that he's prepubescent, which a lot of times the changes in puberty also come with some change in behavior, although I will say just as frequently kids calm down after puberty as they do get more aggressive. So yes, good that you're seeing an endocrinologist. They're going to be looking at testosterone levels and is there anything they can do there. And sometimes it is an issue of just, hormones.
Yep.
So you're doing everything.
There we go. Can you please talk about Gestalt language processors and teaching language in ABA? Do they conflict?
No, they don't conflict, and maybe we can address that at a different, because we have like 1 minute left, and
there's one more question.
Bigger.
But we did really well. We got through most of them. But they don't conflict. But we'll talk more about
Gestalt therapy.
But Maggie wants to know, what would be the signs of intellectual disability in an autistic child? And thank you in advance.
Sure. That one's so intellectual disability. You can't say there are signs, because they might. If you go with signs, you're going to be confused with, is this a sign of intellectual disability, or is this a sign of autism, or is ADHD, or something else? You need to have a test, and there are standardized tests. And if your child is non-verbal, which a lot of kids are, then you need to do a test of IQ, intellectual intelligence quotient, IQ, for hearing impaired kids. There's a few of them, the Merrill-Palmer, the Lighter R. There's lots of tests for deaf kids. Mm-hmm. And that's more an accurate presentation of your child's IQ than a verbal test like the Stanford Binet or there's lots of different tests. So if you do a verbal test, it's not very clear, because our kids don't have fantastic language. So it might be their language is making it look like their IQ is low. If you do a nonverbal test, you're getting kind of more raw IQ. But someone needs to do a test. Without that, there's no way to guess based on symptoms.
Okay. I'm impressed. You got through a lot of questions in a very few minutes. I did not think we were going to get through those. But anyway, thank you, all of you, for participating and for writing in. Tomorrow, we're doing a show, Parent to Parent Talk, just about funding resources. So you'll want to tune in for that. On Thursday, we're doing a top 10 tips. That's a Parent to Parent Talk about bedtime success. On Friday, we're doing a top Ask Dr. Doreen about challenging behavior. And then all next week, for the holiday week, it is an Ask Dr. Doreen marathon, the best of Ask Dr. Doreen.
Wow.
That we'll be playing all next week. So tune in tomorrow. We're going to be talking about funding sources, because a lot of stuff has changed this summer, and I know a lot of you are in need right now. So we're going to talk about that. Thank you all so much for being here. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're amazing. And we'll see you tomorrow. Until then, give your kiddos a hug from me and one for you too. Bye-bye for now.
Bye, everyone.
Don't forget, you can watch Ask Dr. Doreen live every Tuesday morning at 10 a.m. Pacific time. We hope to see you there.